March 19th, 2019. Thank you for attending. Approval of agenda at the March 19th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as presented.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Adoption of the minutes, that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held March the 11th, 2019 be adopted as presented. Moved in second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And the second one, that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held March 13th, 2019 be adopted as presented. Moved. Thank you. And second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Other pertinent business. It's now time to pass it over to our Director of Finance to look at our 2019 financial plan draft. Mr. Cortez.
Thank you, Richard. So what I thought I'd start off with tonight is go through the changes that we've made from the previous meeting and up to now. Show you the effects on the budget, and then after that, if there's new items council wants to bring up or discuss them, we'll go through them after I've gone through the changes. So I'm going to be referring to the changes by page number from your binder from the prior session. And we're starting off with the general fund, so beginning on page 5. So one change, rental income. There was a new rental agreement struck effective January 1st. So the original rental income total of $14,100 is now $20,100, and that represents a $6,000 increase, representing a rental increase on the Artis building there. So.
Right, and if I can just speak to that, because we now have the programming building in the side, so they're maintaining and operating 2 facilities, and it was agreed to, negotiated it out, so everybody's happy.
Also on page 5, conditional grant revenue. Previous number was $2,438,000. It's now $2,631,000, and that is changed due to I was made aware that the grant's not 50-50, but the district's portion is 27%. So the conditional grant revenue is going up $193,000. And also on page, now on page 6, the transfer from prior year's surplus was originally $520,000. I've now dropped that down to $50,000. So there's a $407,000 change there. A lot of that's due to the fact that if you recall, I didn't include the $500,000 transfer from the fire department reserve, so that allowed us to move this down. The next item is a non-cash item, but I've got my numbers that I'm happy with for this budget, and that's the transfer from equity to TCA, and that's just changed $65,000, and it'll be offset by the amortization, so there's no financial impact on the budget. The next item on page 6 was the fire department reserve, which I just touched on. And the transfer from future expenditures is the corresponding decrease in that transfer of $193,000, which offsets the switch in the grant from 50 to 27%. So they offset. So that's good for the district. The transfer from gas tax reserve was at $287,000. It's now down to $87,000, and that's due to the reduction in the paving projects that was touched on last meeting. Now we're into expenses, page 9. This is simply just moving safety or HR contracts, the $45,000 dealing with the safety is now into the safety area of the budget, so it's just a straight switch. It's not a change in the number. Page 13, communications, increase $600 for addition of a new cell phone with upgrades. Page 17, public work admin contracts, was 20,000. It's now 21,200, and that was increasing $1,200 for software upgrades over at Public Works.
What page is that?
And that's on page 17. Page 30. So that was just the other side of moving it from HR Road Safety. Page 31. For streetlight contracts, that was just an adjustment of $400, and that was more or less a rounding item for the budget. So it was just a minor tweak. Page 36, which when I was going through start working on the following 4 years in the budget, I came across a savings of about $45,000 on bylaw 1246 interest. I originally had in there 2 interest payments. So the original number was 89.7, and it's now down to 45,000 because there's only one final interest payment in 2019. So that was a good find. And then the next 3 items on page 36 are just the amortization numbers, which offset that new number at the top there, where it's just a transfer. So they're just offsetting accounting entries. Page 37. Transfer to infrastructure replacement reserve. We originally had $345,000, which was contribution based on the municipal or the infrastructure levy on the revenue side, and then with the reduction in the paving, I've put in an additional $400,000 contribution to the infrastructure reserve. Next one, page 1 on the sewer fund. It's just the 2 adjustments in the sewer fund are just the amortization, and they're not cash numbers for accounting, so there's no impact on the sewer fund that's still balanced. Going into the water fund. Again, the only changes there was to amortization in the sewer fund. Actually, there's one at the 116,000 on the transfer to water. It was originally 134, it's down to 116, and that was reduced 18,000, which I will talk about in a moment. And then moving into the capital fund. A few changes here. I've added $60,000 as unallocated capital projects that may crop up during the year. That's been in there before, and a lot of that was that from that $45,000 I found the savings of the bylaw interest, so it allowed me to put some in there. The finance computer equipment. I haven't got a final number in, but we put an estimate in there for the laptop tablet plan for council chambers for meetings. So that's gone up from 16 to 34.5. Then the paving is down from 1.2 million, cut in half to 600,000. And then on the water, which is on the page 2 of the capital fund. It was for a new water supply line at Lake of the Woods, which failed late last year or early this year, can't remember. But so that's been added, and that dropped the transfer to the water reserve by the corresponding amount.
So was it 18,000?
Yeah. So what I've got here too is, so that I got your undivided attention, is I have printouts of, I have printouts of what I just went through for your,
Oh, you got us.
I didn't want you staring at this and then, so we got 1, 2,
Yeah, that's why it was so quick. Yeah.
3,
What's it?
maybe
He's
there's
got a printout for us. We want to make sure we're paying attention.
I think it's
Yeah.
very
I
simple.
wrote it all.
Should be enough.
Yeah, I'll leave. I haven't heard otherwise.
I don't think he's coming. What? I don't think he's coming.
He's not?
I don't think he's coming. I'll text him earlier and do it.
Please, excuse a few typos, my typo cop was on top of me today. Gonna have to review that. I called it equity. So that was, that's just a printed highlight of what I just went through for your records. So now if I just open it up for council, if they've got other things that they want to discuss, add, change, what have you.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. I'll just throw a few items out myself here before I turn it over to council. Maybe thinking about a few things we talked about. We did have a presentation to council on the Hope Mountain Center Trail presentation for $30,000. Communities in Bloom had asked for 10 for the competition this summer for the carving. We only have a line item for 5,000, so I'd like some discussion on that. And the Community Forest Fund, there's 100,000 sitting in there. We haven't had a discussion yet on some ideas or proposals on what we could do with that money. I think we can have a bit of conversation about that tonight as well. And any capital reserve changes or items that you have, we'll bring forward. And also, I'll turn to staff later on this one. Maybe we did have a ask for some information on council enumeration. Can't say that word. We can talk about that as well, and anything else that's on your mind. Tonight's the night to do it. So, who'd like to start?
I have one.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to wonder, what about with the Tourist Information Center, since it's such a disaster, are we going to put any funds aside for that this year?
If I can, Mr. Mayor, the decision referenced the future, either repairing, replacing, moving, etc., is contingent on, obviously, how the station house settles out and some other factors. Clearly, a new one's not going to be built within this budget year. There is money in unallocated budget, or unallocated capital if significant repairs are decided to move forward, depending on the Director of Operations recommendations and some other things. So, it may be advisable that we don't necessarily include an amount for that, because there are some decisions that need to be taken. The plan can be amended later if council takes some significant decisions and resources accordingly.
Thank you for that. Pretty quiet group tonight. No? Councilor Stewart.
I just have a question, and I noticed that, I think I noticed, resources not here.
Ask your question, please.
Okay, my question would be around, with the increase of development, and more people being in the community, do we need to put a few more dollars in to train more volunteer firefighters to, just to make sure that we have adequate coverage for our area?
And I'll try to answer this in place of Tom as best as I can. Tom and myself and the management team monitor fire and all public safety services on your behalf. So we always look at what the coverages are required by the underwriters, for example, industry standards, fire associations. He knows that development is on the uptick, and he has not brought to my attention that a necessary significant increase in staff is required in the volunteer fire service. He has a capital projects plan that, as far as I know, and I believe, anticipates gradual growth in respect to how we're growing. And they're significant. There's the one truck and other heat sensors, thermal sensors. So the fire department is keeping up with the times and growing its capability within resource limitations. If there was a significant threat that was to come because of resourcing to the fire service, we would of course apprise council of that, and we would advise that you resource accordingly.
If I could just add to that, in sitting down with the fire chief, putting this together, he added significant training to this year's budget.
That's all I have.
Not just for current members, but I guess annually does the recruitment drive. So if he's successful there, then some of that training is going to be for members as well. So
Thank you. Yeah, I saw the number. I just was hoping
he's
it
not
was not short, that we were adequately
he's
funded.
certainly looking at keeping the members up to speed in their training aspects. So.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Erickson?
So through you again. So I'm just wondering, with the new development in Silver Creek, with the sewer and water, are we gonna be out some money for development of sewer with that new service station of supplying J's there and the new development, with the storage units and, developing that area? Are we gonna be having to go and budget for that? If we're gonna add on to sewer and water there? 'Cause that's coming next year.
I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor, through you. One property in particular, you're speaking of on Hope Road. They've got a right of way through the Flying V property for their sewer line, but they will be installing that.
That
Tank, yes.
Okay.
So there won't be any expense to the district on that. And your question regarding, were you speaking of the Beacon Road subdivisions? Well, the approving officer's gonna have to have a conversation with the developers, now that we have information come to light with some limitations with the water system there. So certainly some negotiations are gonna happen between the developer and the planning department here to see whether we can bridge the gap somehow.
So will it be some quite a bit of expense for us as a community in that area?
Well, I can't say at this point. It's preliminary right now with the developments that are on the books there. We have had conversations to do with some on-site upgrades, but nothing's been finalized yet.
Mr. Mayor, as a normal course of practice during the development process, we try to avoid paying for the upgrades because that's a normal cost of business for developers normally. What ends up happening is that we get the maintenance costs if indeed we end up owning those increased infrastructure. So it's a way of doing business that makes sense as opposed to, paying for everything that normally developers would pay for. And if you look at the ESSO, for example, that's being developed, they put in the sewer line at their expense across under the highway. That we negotiated that for good reason. And
So what I'm concerned about, so once it gets across the highway, then do they actually tie it into our system, or will we have that expense to tie it in?
no, they tie it in, they do everything at their
Okay, just
expense.
want to make sure that we don't have to budget for that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Councillor Smith?
We talked before about the agriculture area plan. Was there anything in budget we talked about having a facilitator look at, to hire somebody to get that organized? Are we going to do something with that, or?
We haven't reported back, myself and the Director of Community Development, on that.
Yeah.
So we feel it's a bit early because we haven't deduced how best to support that plan. And we'll come forward to council with suggestions and any resource requirements we advise. There may be areas within the budget that could absorb some of that, and if not, again, as we accumulate some of these issues through the year, we can go through an amendment later to reflect reality. Again, this is a plan.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to see us put some more money away for our trucks, I think, for the 2 sand trucks that we have. I think we only have 2 right now. So I think that there should be some more money than just $25,000 away. I understand that we're gonna possibly relocate some used equipment, but I still think that we should maybe see if we can put some more money away for the trucks, because you're looking at roughly $300,000 for a sand truck, and I would think that we're gonna need one within the next couple of years, from my personal experience.
And do you have a recommendation that you're gonna put forward on amount?
I'd like to see us put, if we're looking at a truck, I'd like to see us put $100,000 away. So I'd make a motion that we put $100,000 away this year, next year, and then the following year we can get ready to buy one. So I make a motion that we put $100,000 away in this in this draft budget for a truck, a sand truck, a 5-ton sand truck.
I turn to Director.
I don't know if it has to be that. I guess it could just be for equipment reserves, I guess.
Well, we'll go through this account here.
Yeah, it's an equipment reserve. Okay, yeah, that's where I was seeing.
So you'd like to see that go up to 100, so up 75?
Yeah.
Done.
Mr. Dickon, is that a reasonable number?
I would think that you could probably put more away into the reserve, to be honest.
Yeah, I just was throwing it.
You know, I put 25,000 in there just as a sort of a placeholder and to get the conversation started, but as I alluded to last meeting, I feel that, you know, we've got roughly, you know, $3 million worth of equipment, and most of it is past, you know, 10 years of service, and so, you know, we're looking at some significant expenses coming up, and you know, the reserve basically has been built up over the last 3 years or so based on the sale of equipment, but you know, you're only getting 20 cents on the dollar, right? So with used equipment, so that will not sustain the replacement.
Councillor Stewart.
So just a question, so 150,000 might even be a better number if it's 5% of your total assets, right?
Yeah, it's whatever council is comfortable with. You know, certainly with some of the changes that Dale's made here and some of the, particularly the fire truck transfer from reserve, now we have some money there that we could put away.
Councillor.
So would you think we should buy one this year, put that much money away for one this year, and then another one next year? Because
I don't think we should buy anything.
not buy, but put the money away in reserves. So not for one this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the 5-ton sand, salt trucks, it's all of our equipment, so. I think a realistic number, if you're looking for a figure for me, would be 250,000.
Okay.
The best practice is normally 10% of your fleet with a lifespan of 10%, so that means you're gonna be through the $300,000 mark. roughly.
Well, from my perspective, I would entertain that number as long, and we see what kind of an outcome we're gonna have here. So-
300,
No, 250.
250.
Yeah, so,
Is that gonna,
Well, I guess the only comment I can say to that is ideally, I mean, the whole idea of your replacement reserves is to at least contribute your amortization for the year, so that you're building up, you know, for example, if you had a $100,000 vehicle and it's good for 10 years, you want to put at least 10,000 a year for 10 years, knowing that, of course, you're still dealing with inflation on top of that, but at least, and then part of the problem with municipalities across the country is the infrastructure deficit, because you cannot realistically fund
Councillor Smith.
And also our water and sewer, we need to make sure we look after that, because we're gonna need to do that before we blacktop. So we need to have,
And I've got contributions in there as well. Yeah. I mean, the sewer reserve is probably in need of more replacement, only because we've used some of it in the last couple of years, because we have the PCC project. But there's not as much gravy in the sewer fund, and as it stands right now, but I'll review that as well tonight.
All right.
So you can see how the number there has changed from the deficit of 225 with that addition there. So we'll just go through, plug in whatever changes, and then we'll see how we look at the number wrapped up here.
Yeah. Can I speak to that? No? Okay. You good? This is a quiet group tonight. Now, we don't need to put a motion through on that specific item. We'll wait until everything's changed.
Because it's committee of the whole, if you agree to basically what's being done, obviously when you move this into the general, then it's actual official debate. and just-
Yeah. Councillor Smith threw me off a bit there on his motion, but I don't need it. Okay, so that's good. It's, okay. Well, let's entertain Communities in Bloom for an additional 5,000, and Councillor Smith has advised me he would like to leave the room. So we have this here in discussion, and that's appropriate.
So is this sorry, one question, is this based off of just this one, not one time, but because it's for the chainsaw carvings this year? Because they're considered a line item every year.
They are,
right?
it's a special,
5,000 every year, I believe we do.
we do 5,000, it's a special year this year, they need an additional 5,000.
Okay.
And, I mean,
Is this for one car? Or majority of more than one car?
it's helped put on the
For the whole thing?
whole, the event as well, so.
Is it growing, Peter, is that why you want more money, or is it like what restricted last year? Did you say specifically what restricted them last year for the $5,000?
No, see, that's where we need Councillor Smith to do his explanation here, but,
Okay.
Well, he's
Let's bring
allowed
it back
to.
in before yeah.
My recollection is this isn't an annual event.
Every other year.
So I think,
Oh, it's
not
every year?
2018, but
It's every
20,
year.
Yes.
but 2017, we had 5,000 for the wood carving.
So it's going.
I'm just trying to find it here, I think there's 5 in there now.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same situation that happened with Poker Gate Days too. Last year, budget seat, they came and asked for a little additional funds because it's 50th anniversary. Not that this is an anniversary thing, but it's more special.
Oh, it's
I
down
know,
at the
I
front.
thought it was on here already.
Yeah, we'll bring Councillor Smith in and answer your questions.
Oh,
and
no,
then send them away. That's probably a better idea.
It's not a major thing.
Yeah, so
No, it's important.
currently there's 5 in there.
Yeah, yeah. So there's
Just for the chainsaw carving event or for Communities in Bloom in total?
yeah.
Well, there's 9,000 for the wood carving, which includes their annual maintenance of everything. And then there was preliminarily 5,000 in for the event.
So 14.
So, there's 2 different line items. There's
Yeah.
Community and Blooms, which has their 4,500.
Line
Again,
item.
their own line. That's just for their maintenance and things they do. For this draft, we've got 5,000 on top of the 4.
So we already have it in there.
So the question is whether they're wanting 10 or 5, I guess is what I'm hearing.
5 more.
They want 5
Yeah.
or to make it 10.
yeah, we usually always have had 10 for the event, and also this year, instead of 8 cards, we have 15. We're also going to put a carving up at the info center. We're moving one over to the police station, putting a new one in front of Envision, because one of Envision's kind of cooking, because it's sun there and everything else, but it'll be fun. The police have been after us. Every year we have one police one from the town. So we'll put one over there, and then the other one, we'll put one over at the doctor's office, because somebody stole it.
So it's,
Total of.
so with the 4,000 is what would cover that type of activity. That's
No,
outside of the
the
realm.
4,000 covers all the maintenance.
Yeah,
Like we do all the wood, filling, that's what, the 4,000 for maintenance,
Okay.
for buying and filling it up, for all the carving, stuff like that, we do stuff. And then the 5,000 was for the event, but we need 10 for the event, which we normally have 8. So just to get perspective, Chetwynd does 42,000 for the event, and their maintenance was 18,000, and they do a 10-person party. They pay dearly for it. But the reason we're so good here is we have so many good people in town here that are very generous and support this thing, and that makes it very good. It's good for town, but it's nice that other people in town step up to be pride and be a part of this, so.
So you wanna bump that 5,000 up to 10,000?
Okay,
For year one.
can I just stop? To avoid any conflict,
Oh.
you're letting discussion.
Is that, yeah, is every,
Explain their question.
anything else you know?
No.
Questions get answered?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Oh, just also too, when we do the event, because the event, when they're so, the deal is they gotta do first coat on all the carvings, so it takes quite a bit just for their, the bill for that's like $1,000. Because if you don't, then we have to do it, and it takes quite a while to get them all done. If you don't do it right away too, they start cracking, so. At that, I'll leave
Okay,
it.
you can
So then I have a question then.
Yeah,
If the 10,000 is for prize money and.
yeah,
And
well, actually,
that's-
the prize money is 22,000, but 10 the town pays, we raise the
Okay.
rest.
So we're,
But the varnish or whatever, is that going out of the 4,000?
The, part of the varnish for the other ones, for finishing that, comes out of that, but we buy some more for this event too, because we need.
Is this for the wood also? You buy the
Pardon?
wood, is this 10,000 go for buying the wood too?
That goes towards buying wood, transporting, for the whole event.
Okay,
So we 22,000 is prize money alone.
okay.
And so we're running on 30 bucks. We get 10 from you, we can usually raise the rest. There's a lot of very generous people in town, so. Okay.
All right. Good. Now what? Is everybody comfortable with that now?
Yeah, I think we should, I'd like to see us go ahead with the 5,000 extra for the wood carving. It's a huge boost for the town. It's a huge job for the town. It's great. And you see the tourists come look at the carvings all the time. We gotta keep the carvings up. in our community.
All right.
Done?
Sound good?
consensus there?
Seems pretty fair.
I would think it goes to operating costs and not prize money then. I would like to see more operating costs
All right.
as opposed to prize money. I don't think that's the business brain.
All right, moving along, anyone else have anything else at the moment? Otherwise, I'd like to speak briefly again about the Hopeland Mountain Center made a presentation about trail maintenance for $30,000 to council over for a pilot project. I don't know if Mr. Ford-Lewowski wants to speak to this any further, or no, you're good?
No, Mr. Mayor, just the remaining topic after that.
Okay. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, on the trail, the maintenance, we can't do it for what they do it for. Like it's a deal. There's a lot of work that's done as volunteer work, and we're only paying for a portion of it, so it's a very good deal for us. So
I also agree it's a good return on our investment.
it is, and also on the tour side, so it's a very good thing.
Is this gonna be a yearly cost? Or is it a
3
one-time?
years.
It's a 3-year pilot project supervised by the Director of Operations that goes through.
So 30,000 per year for 3 years, 90,000 total?
Yes.
That was a different.
So
Councilor Steele.
I just a question for clarification. So in the document, it said that it would be supervised by Public Works. So do we have the time to supervise that project? Is this something they could do absent of our supervision, more like a contribution to the Trails Committee? And are they hiring, are they using your staff, or are they going to be bringing in new staff? I just want to make sure that we're not draining our public works.
They're using their own staff
Okay,
and leveraging some of the funds to bring in students
okay.
at certain times. So there's a lot of questions there, Councilor.
It's
Sorry.
an excellent work program for some
As long as we're not putting pressure on our already pressured
No,
system.
No, we're taking away from, not taking away from staff, but I guess we,
Leave you.
make it easier for our existing staff in the Parks Department, that they don't have to look after a lot of these things. So,
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
kind of answered enough of that. Anything to add to the program? I mean,
Oh, I could add, Mr. Mayor, that, you know, discussions with the group, you know, my initial comments were, you know, I don't want to be burdened basically with this. I mean, you know, a lot of the trail maintenance that they're proposing is not trail maintenance that we do anyways. So they're not taking work away from us. It's really not work that we get to. You know, a lot of it is to do with the hiking trails and not so much trails in the parks in town. So, you know, the group wanted to sit down with myself at the beginning of the season, you know, if this was approved, and kind of go over the work plan and get some agreement from the district through me on, you know, what they were to accomplish. And I thought that was reasonable, and it keeps everybody in the loop as to what's happening out there. So that was the extent of it. But basically, the group themselves would they'd hire their own people, and they would do the trail maintenance, and it really wouldn't involve me any further than the initial conversation at the beginning of the year.
this to me is also a strong component of the tourism plan. I mean, these trails bring people to our community, and we have to maintain them. So I'm in favor of this.
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Jerry.
They're currently operating, like, they can keep them up to date without this money, but this would be over and above and help them to bring on more staff to keep them at a safe, like, is this a safety issue kind of thing, or is it
No.
more just to frighten them up and
You
kind
know, they're taking on more of the trails. They had a list in here before, but I can't find where they did that.
Yeah, I remember from the delegation.
Presentation, yeah.
So they're adding new trails? Or is this just maintenance?
This is maintenance of existing, as far as I know.
Yep.
Okay.
So are we talking about like the nature trail and up by, up across Suckers Creek? over in that
Yes,
area?
including the Rotary Trail, HBC Trail,
Look up,
Hope Lookout.
Hope Mountain,
They're the ones that put the stairs in up there and the benches.
yeah.
Yeah.
So are they gonna hire 2 or 3 people, or is this like June, July, August?
Yeah, we usually, yeah, they have to get a certain number because of when we're working too, but for safety.
They talked about crews here. I'm not sure how many are in a crew.
I think it was to do with the student program we got too as well.
And they use some of the funds to leverage grants to get more.
Yeah.
more numbers.
I wasn't there.
Materials, like this year we took, I believe they look up there, did some benches on some of the mountain tops and stuff like that this year too. And I know this program's a little bit different, but what they do with their money, they do leverage along a lot of it towards it.
Yeah, put that one.
No, I went through it afterwards, but then just a little bit of it, but I'm in support of it because I know Kelly Pearson, those guys,
This
for what they do for money,
Yeah.
is amazing.
Can I make a motion to move this forward on the $30,000? I think it's an excellent money spent. And, okay, everybody?
I'm good.
And,
I think it's great.
Down with the Director of Finance, did you hear that?
Yeah.
We're gonna move forward with that
$30,000?
I just don't know where we're gonna put it on here.
He's got it, he's,
Is there a group name or?
Hope that was that.
The Hope Mountains?
Yeah.
yeah, they do the lead agency for
Hope Mountain Trail Maintenance, but I guess, or Hope Mountain Center.
Question.
Counselor Stew.
I'm just curious, so are we doing the 30,000 for this year, or are we talking about the 30,000 for 3 consecutive years?
The proposal was for a 3-year pilot project, so 30,000 each year for
the
three
next
years.
Okay.
But they're willing to revisit and have a look at it. If it's not working out,
Yeah.
we're not happy, they're not happy,
Yeah.
they're willing to look at it.
We're just dealing with this year for now, right? And
Well-
then it comes around next year, we'll look at it again.
I guess you could use,
Okay,
maybe that was Symphonious now. Well, we're adjusting, well, we can adjust again next year, but if you're gonna adjust, he's gonna adjust the 3 of the 5 in your budget, right?
But when I work on the next,
I think that's
like,
probably-
we're strictly working on 2019 here, so I've started working on 20 and 21, because I have to have that ready for the bylaw. I will include the next 2 years. Yeah.
All right, we can look at it then. Have any of you had some thoughts about the community forest fund that I talked about earlier for projects? There's $100,000 sitting there that we can utilize. I don't know what the previous council had any conversation at all about this money, and what your thoughts are.
I know that Esther from the community garden had asked for some funds.
So,
Mr. Mayor, there's a couple ways to approach this. There is a policy as far as disbursement goes if you develop. Now, you can trigger that and then have stakeholder groups basically apply for it, similar to grants and aid, like Councillor Smith talks about. Or, and I think this is where you're getting, Mr. Mayor, if council believes that the use of that money for a good community cause, the argument can be made to just, notwithstanding the policy, use it and include it in the budget for something that's known, that could be suggested, then maybe approach it that way. I would suggest that maybe there's a third way, that if council wants to safeguard that, they can and identify something later. But, again, we have community groups that want access to it. So unless there's a burning priority, maybe, because you're new council, you're now on panel, maybe trip the policy for the first time and see how many people apply and for what. Again, we have a policy, you have access to it, and it divvies the funds available into 3 main areas.
And if I could add, from a budget impact point of view, we received the money last year, and it was set up as it did not flow through surplus, so it's set up as a, for lack of a better word, a liability account.
Standalone.
So it's on our books, like either you can classify it as either like a deferred revenue or probably it's best classified as a deferred revenue. So then what I would do is I'd bring that deferred revenue into the budget as a revenue item, and then you'd have a line item for dispersing it. So at this stage of the game, without knowing applicants and everything, maybe what I could recommend is if council chose an amount out of that 100,000 that they may look at for 2019, is that I bring that dollar amount in as revenue and the line item offsetting it. If nothing happens, then there's no harm, no foul. That money hasn't, physically been taken out of that account. But if you don't bring it in as revenue out of that deferred revenue, then you're basically, and you put a line item in there, then the current year's budget's absorbing it, not the actual money that it was intended for. So it shouldn't, it won't have an impact on the budget because it was money that was received last year for that purpose. It was disbursement from the forest fund to be used for council's discretionary, however they decide with the applicant process. So I would just suggest that we bring some in if you think you're going to be dispersing some this year, and then it doesn't have to be an exact amount, of course. If there's gravy at the end, we just don't even touch it. It just stays in that fund.
All right.
So, Mr. Twardowski, didn't we have a policy and there was like 3 different areas that the money could go to, or 4 different areas?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Back there.
and it was, do you have them there?
Youth and seniors, 25%, regional community at large, 25%, arts, cultural heritage and recreation, 25%, and then there's the CLCCF Joint Legacy Fund, 25%, and I don't know what that is.
So with that, I knew there was one youth and senior. Would it be appropriate, I'm just asking because, I don't know, would it be appropriate, the senior home that you go to all the time on Park, they're in desperate need of some maintenance in that place. Would it be appropriate to do some of that there?
Mr. Mayor, absolutely. So in light of the discussion that Dale's had with you, I would advise that and it sounds like there's some will to, let's get the disbursements going and have stakeholder groups apply. I would suggest you bring it all out, or be prepared to do the whole 100K depending on who applies for what. At least you have the flexibility as opposed to shortchanging. And then whatever's not used, like Mr. Cordes says, can just remain in that separate account for use in future.
Yeah, there's no harm in bringing the whole 100K and putting 100K as an expense item, and then just let the application process handle what's dispersed. But I would think, and I haven't got the policy handy, that it's an actual applicant process. It's not just you know, council picking a group and throwing money out there, right? So.
And that's why I brought it forward, to see if there's no one on council that really had a strong vision of what they wanted to do with some of these funds, that we should put it out there to the public and see what comes in. And I didn't know with the previous council how far along you got in conversation at all, so that's okay.
We need a motion then to move the 100,000 onto a line item?
No, I'll just
No,
bring it in.
request.
I'll just make a note, it's gonna have no effect on that 260. Because I'm bringing money we've already received in and offset it with the expense line item, so it won't change anything, so. And again, at the end of the year, if nothing happens, then it hasn't been touched, so we still have it, so.
As a result of the motion that was passed by council to staff to look into council remuneration, Mr. Fortolowski would like to speak to that tonight. Because this is where we need to put some funds aside if we're going to move forward with that. Mr. Fortolowski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will come forward with a more detailed report next month in April, as requested. But I've done some initial analysis, and I'm at the 85% solution in my own head. I have a recommended amount that I would advise you put away in this year's budget, prorated, or no, well, depending. I imagine all of it, because you're going to retroactively get some, I suppose. But let me just give a bit of a situation. When we surveyed like communities for population and municipalities, not regional districts, on average, for basic part-time remuneration for councillors, you're about 5K under the average. For mayor, you're just under 9K under or average. In addition to that, we don't have a per diem, per se, established for you. And many communities do, and in my opinion, I think it's a fair thing to get in place. It's not meant to replace income lost when you represent the district and go do work, but it's a per diem that's meant to signify you're making some sacrifice, here's some money. So in fact, if you look at what I recommend we include money for per diems, for a full day, $100 a day, for a half day, $50 a day. It's less than minimum wage, but if you take time off your job, you know, you should maybe get some. It balances that out. So what I'm suggesting is that to bring remuneration for part-time counselors and a part-time mayor up, and to establish per diems budgeted for council members 10 days per year, full days, and mayors 14 days per year. I recommend that you put away 45K in this budget. If you're comfortable with that, that's great, because that's a nice one-shot thing. And obviously the option is that if you're not comfortable, you can phase that in or not do anything. But I believe the 45K is not a huge amount, and it only gets you to the mean, to the average of what other communities are paying.
Any questions of Mr. Fortolowski?
Can I ask on the last increase that council mayor had, you know?
There's a COLA applied, I believe.
There's a current policy that basically CPI, it's not very much.
So the last significant update to your wages, not since I've been here in 2012, so.
1982.
Back when dollars were printed on a Gazette, I suppose.
Yeah. When a dime was valuable.
Yeah.
I know, it's a tough conversation to have, and it needs to be talked about, and I appreciate the information back. So what's council's wishes on this? Mr. Fortolowski's recommendation at this time, and then when it comes back with a report, we can adjust it.
think it's not, well, it's fair to ask just to be at average anyway.
Yes, but it puts us at average. So it looks like we have a consensus there, Mr. Cordes?
45?
45.
And that takes in the per diem too.
And
John?
we'll work out the details as far as how much, you know, how that's divvied up between per diem and remuneration direct.
Yeah, why don't
Yeah, I mean, it gets it in the budget so that, if the budget's approved, then we can actually start working on the individual. Oops. Oh,
Can I ask a question? So I see the accident insurance, is that for council for traveling somewhere or something like that, or?
It's just been always there, it's just for, it's through MIA.
Oh,
You're also indemnified, you have insurance, like executive insurance for decisions you take, et cetera, and if court actions are levied against you, you're covered as per any other municipal elected officials.
Are we covered under WCB? Like, I'm just saying, if say we're at a conference or something like that, though, and somebody fell and hurt themselves or something like that.
You gotta sue.
No.
outside in the streets and.
Oh, sure.
My first answer to that is probably no.
Yeah, because we don't get a wage, right? Like,
No.
yeah, okay. Good. Yeah. Don't get hurtful. It's just simple. It's simple.
Yeah, right, well,
No drinking.
Talk to
That's right.
As you're plugging in the numbers there, are you able to tell us now where we are budget-wise, what percentage we're at? Or?
We're 305 in the hole,
No.
but I have I will have this balance momentarily.
Going back to the zero.
Yeah, me too. So this, don't pay attention to these other columns, they're not
Yeah.
finished yet, but we're balanced at 0. As you can see there, that's on the detail sheet there. So what I did there is, if you recall from our first draft, I had 520 from surplus. So the beauty of coming to the meeting tonight and having it down at, what they had there, 50,000, I think initially. I knew that some things like this would come up and that we could easily be able to handle them, so.
Easily handled them.
Yeah.
I like it.
What would it look like if we are at 2%? Put the budget up by.
And right now in this draft, I've raised 3.4% more tax revenue.
You've raised 3 point.
$264,000 I've got more in tax revenue than last year, and that equates to 3.43% or something like that.
Councilor Smith.
But that's, yeah, I was gonna say, that's based on assessment values going up and obviously
With,
some
well,
of
with
the
all
zonings.
the, with all the factors now.
Yeah.
New buildings.
Like, the way that, I mean, I'm always accustomed to budgeting is that, council determines through the budget process how much, you know, when everything flows through and you've got all your expenditures in there and everything, and say for example, I didn't use that, surplus avenue to balance our budget, and there was just no way that we could do that, and and you're all happy with every other number in there, well, your only option is to go up to your tax revenue and say, well, we gotta bump that up 305,000,
That's a lot.
right? So, it councils, you know, like, again, I brought this, it was based on prior councils kind of in the 2.5 range as what's been raised over the last few years since I've been here. And that's tax revenue increases, not a tax rate increase.
Right.
So in the draft that I've got presented here, it's 3.4% or about $264,000 more than what we had in our tax budget last year. So,
But the rate went down.
and the rate went down because of the assessment and all the factors that play into it. So, as I showed you in those scenarios, people's assessments were going up, but it was under the 16% average assessment increase. So you're basically looking at probably paying less tax in this budget if you're under the 16%. Anybody got hit higher, say if for whatever reason they had a 50% increase in their assessment, well, they're gonna pay more. If council says, well, I wanna raise more than 264,000, that's your call, and then I can punch the numbers in. But the tax rate is a product of what you wanna make as, bring in as tax revenue based on the assessments that are input into the formula, and then the resulting tax rate comes out of it.
Councilor,
Just to try and make it plain for me, the assessments went up 300, just say 300,000, just for an easy number this year, but that's because of the new construction and new build in our area, new growth. Am I right?
Well, no, what I alluded to in the prior meeting was, out of that 264,000 additional revenue that we raised, or planning to raise in this draft, about 170,000 of that can be attributed to new construction. That wasn't on our assessment roll last year.
Okay.
So about 100,000 of that is getting more revenue from existing rolls.
So compared this year to last year, we raised the taxes roughly 2%, 2.1, I think, last year, roughly.
We raised tax revenue about 2.4%.
Okay.
Not taxes.
Not tax
revenue,
rates, tax revenue.
Yeah, tax revenue. But we raised that by raising the taxes 2%.
No.
No,
Yeah, no,
you
just tax-
can't get confused with the tax rate at 2%, or, like, as you saw too, the tax rates, it's
It's like
something here.
4.3 and like 3.7 or something like that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just wanted to compare last year to this year. That's my confusion.
Like, our tax rate in the draft here actually went down around 14%, the tax rate.
Okay.
But that still gets us $264,000 more revenue. If you were to keep the tax rate at the same rate, I'm guessing you're probably grabbing another $500,000 or $600,000 on top of it.
Oh, that's what I wanted.
Because you got part of the equation is your assessments.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
And the assessments went up over 16%. So that's attributing to allowing for the lower tax rate to gain the more revenue.
Okay, my question.
If council's happy with 3.43 in this budget, then, and the other thing too, as I said, is that when we get the revised roll, and council's still happy with the 264 increase, the only thing that's gonna change is the tax rate. Because the formula will still generate 264,000 based on the final assessment totals. So it's gonna have an impact on what the final tax rate's gonna be. And if there's not much change, then obviously what you saw in the draft is gonna be pretty darn close. If the assessments went up slightly due to, well, chances are it's not gonna go up, because usually what happens between the completed roll and revised roll is people appeal their taxes. And on rare occasions when appeals happen, you might get thinking that you're gonna go in to win, but you actually, the appeal board actually actually bumps it up, say, well, we missed something, so. But generally, when people appeal, they either win or it doesn't happen, so the effect on your revised roll is usually a little bit down, if anything, so. Not expecting a huge change in the revised roll, so. I don't imagine a lot's gonna change with the tax rate.
Just a question. So do we want to transfer money from surplus when we're actually trying to save in another area?
Well, the thing we signed the surplus transfer is that in the prior year, we're in a surplus position. I don't know the final number, but I mean, you budget and you go through the process and if we had a deficit last year, I couldn't use that. So it's a bit, it's kind of like, the simplest way to explain it is we don't want to tax people twice because some things didn't get done and we're including them in this budget again. So we set tax rates based on saying, well, we're gonna do this, but we didn't get around to it, so it's not very fair to go tax them again for something when we didn't do the project, so that more or less falls into the surplus, which I'm dragging from to help balance our budget so that we're not taxing them again, which is, and to me, that's the fair thing to do, obviously, so.
So if we do it like this, will the budget for the taxation thing that you showed us the other day, will it look similar to that then? The increase, last meeting we had, you showed us.
The example.
Well,
Yeah, the
examples, the only thing that might change on those scenarios is if their property was appealed, it would change their assessment, but that's a pretty good idea of what's gonna happen in those scenarios, is that, you know, unless your tax assessment went up over 16%, you're probably gonna pay less taxes, even though your assessment went up. And there's, like I said, I've gone over the factors, there's numerous factors, new construction, and it helps contribute to the increased revenue that, I mean, obviously if you have a building that wasn't there last year and it's added to your tax base, well, that's the whole idea of having development, is to help increase your tax base, so.
Any other questions right now as we stand on this budget? Maybe that attests to your, all the staff's hard work that they've done, very little change.
So what I'm proposing, and I didn't get a chance to talk with Donna, and I don't know if Linda mentioned it, but we have a meeting scheduled for 27th. I don't see the need of that meeting for that tonight until we get the final assessment rolling. Now, my deadline to get this to Donna, in order to have 3 readings for April
8th, so I need the bylaw completed in my hand by the morning of the 4th.
So
Our agendas go out before the package, so I need it.
I'm hoping that we get the revised roll on the first, right, or it's Monday.
That's a Monday.
So I'm thinking maybe if we propose a meeting for the 2nd, which is a Tuesday, that if anything comes out of that meeting, I've at least got 1 day to put things together for Donna. So I'll have the other 4 years all balanced, so I'm really only concerning myself with the 19th question.
Mr. Mayor, if I can interject, is it possible we could call the meeting for the Wednesday? Because we have to give 24 hours notice. That way, we can know by Tuesday morning and give 24 hours notice, as opposed to cancel a meeting.
But it doesn't, our agenda goes that if we meet on the 3rd, I need the bylaw complete in my hand at 4:30 on the 3rd.
So that's the regular meeting.
Because our agenda goes out the
Well,
next
it's the
day.
regular meeting, yeah.
So that doesn't give Dale time.
So you need it on the 4th.
Well, our agenda goes out on the 4th.
Yeah, so if I've got the 3rd to
Yeah.
work all day on it,
That's right.
then I'm okay.
Yeah.
So,
So if we had the meeting on the 3rd, if you're cutting it way too close, council wouldn't get the packages in time.
so that's what I'm proposing. I just don't see the need for the 27th, only because if we're pretty much there, the only real slight change that's gonna happen is I'll give you the final assessment numbers that make, my estimation probably won't change very much.
I can't be that day.
So we come to meetings from the 27th to the 2nd.
That's what I'm suggesting,
I have to be that day.
because I don't think we're gonna get, we're not gonna make much change here on the 27th.
Ms. Bellingham, if you could for me, please, we're canceling the 27th, but then when would the next one be?
The April 2nd,
It
so
would-
he's proposing for a budget, so council,
That's
I could,
Tuesday.
if you agree to it, I'll send out new calendar invites or updates tomorrow. So instead of meeting Wednesday next week, you would meet Tuesday, April the 2nd, to get a final look at what Dale's done with it, and then he will make any necessary changes, formalize the bylaw, and I've got it in the agenda on, for you guys on the 4th, so that on the 8th you can give us 3 readings.
All right, thank you. That makes more sense.
Okay.
And then what I'll have for the second too is I'll unhighlight the changes we had from the first meeting into that, this meeting, and then I'll highlight the changes, so that you can see what we did from this meeting. So, and then, obviously, to save on paper, that will, once the bylaws adopted, then you'll get a package without the colors.
Yeah, we both like
Let's save on the boundary, great.
All right.
So the, I won't be able to get that in because I have to be.
Okay, that's fine. We have, you're the only one I've heard from, so.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Forlowski?
No,
Okay.
progress is being
All right.
made, you're working.
Motion to close the meeting. Move, second, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you very much to staff.